he was a lesser.
Mr. Stock finally realized where his bread is buttered.
Now, is it okay to introduce the guests now?
Yes.
Who are much
Right
more
ahead.
important than the co-hosts of the show. I guess don't need any introduction to Dave Barry. Dave is a well-known writer, worldwide, I might add, and who's based out of Miami, Florida. So one of the talented people we have here in our humble little town. Welcome.
Want me to introduce the other guest?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And the other guest is John Barry, who also writes for the Herald. And what happened here, actually, is that Mr. Stock asked me to get the famous Barry that wrote for the Herald, and I figured since John Barry wrote an article about me, he must be the famous one, and so that's who I got. And what's this other guy doing here? Who's this other guy? Dave. Who is he?
Well, that opens up to an interesting start of the show. John Barry, you, as Mr. Poe mentioned, you do write for the Herald. Is this your TV debut?
Yes, yes. Just being here legitimizes my career.
Well, I'm glad that we could be there here at this special time. You plan more TV? Are you?
I'll come back as often as your show needs me.
Well, we'll see.
Well, let's not to belabor this point, but you did mention an article. What were you referring to, Mr. Poe?
Oh, well, you know, it was just another attempt, pitiful attempt, really, to link me with my long ago ancestor. It's a distant relation, indirect, but, you know, for some reason, writers are fascinated, newspaper journalists seem to be fascinated with trying to link me somehow with the other Edgar Allan Poe, the less famous.
Right.
Edgar
What's
Allan
fascinating
Poe.
to me
So
is that he was a rather tragic figure, and you kind of carry on that tradition.
what do you mean?
Well, he's kind of a gory writer, and his personal life was always kind of in question, and
he's dead.
He's dead. He's dead. So
I
John,
don't know.
all right, well, let's talk a little bit. We have some time here. The show just started. The series of 12 shows just started. John,
You're nervous, aren't you, Mr. Stock?
Not really.
You're sweating. Here.
Thank you. Thank you.
The show's already started, and you just started.
I want to get to John first. You wrote this article, as Mr. Poe is saying. How did that come about?
Well, you see, I do serious stories as opposed to Dave, who does the funny stories. And I was
That's
looking,
why that's why he's the more famous one?
So, I looked at the career of Allan Poe, and I thought, would a flattering story pump some life into it? And I think it did. I think he did have some success after that story came out. But it was essentially about the book fair in Miami, and the fact that they were honoring a famous Poe while not inviting the other Poe to the festivities.
Which I could have
Seemed a
cared
little-
less about, Mr. Stock. I was working on a cruise ship at the time anyway. I couldn't have attended anyway.
And there's another eerie parallel, too, because Edgar Allan Poe, the writer, also worked the cruise ship.
All the time.
That's right, yeah.
Well, he had to, because in those days they didn't have the international copyright law, and he always had to. Well, you know, I just scraped by wherever he could because they were printing Dickens for free, and of course they were printing Poe overseas for free. But yeah, so he had to do the cruise ship lecture tour.
As I understand it, what happened was Allan waited for this article to come out. In the meantime, he forgot that I was even doing anything on the book fair. And he begins to read this story, and he's saying, what's the stuff about the book fair?
That's all this crap.
He gets real upset.
Book fair? What book fair? Meanwhile, you would have thought I would have remembered the book fair. Of course, according to this
He comes in
article,
about the 10th paragraph.
Al Poe, who also is an actor, they had famous actors, or sort of famous, not as famous as I am, but you know, actors with a name. Al Poe, doing readings from Poe's stories. Al Poe, who was also an actor, was not invited to do a reading. He seemed slightly undone when told about it. The tiny beads of sweat on his broad forehead, a slight trembling of his thin lips.
Very good, bro.
Might the book fair organizers live to regret their slight? I had actually, as he said, I had completely forgotten that there even was a book fair, and as I recall when he did mention, I made a joke about it. So would that have, did this make it a more interesting article? What was did this make it, I don't know, would it have been less of an article if you just said that I made a joke about it?
Well,
I just love to watch guys, you know, whine about their publicity, you know?
He has a resume that he hands out to reporters when he's interviewed, and at the end it says something like, I don't care what you say about me, just say my name.
Just put it in print.
Which I took literally.
Yeah.
Good, all
And then
right.
he's here whining
He's
away.
He's got me there, okay.
Next he's going to say his forehead isn't broad, you know? That's what I'm waiting for.
Well, it says here he has a broad forehead, fine boned jaw, black eyes, and most unsettling, a nervous, jangling sort of presence. Wait, what does he mean by that? What is jangling, Mr. Stock? What is that? I don't understand.
I
Is there a
just-
dictionary here?
I think it just kind of enforces the fact that you are a tragic figure.
Well,
Hold
There
on
are
a
no-
bit.
jangling, nervous. What does he mean by that?
There were a number of women who called and were asking for your phone number.
They
We
were?
don't give those out. Of
Really?
course, yeah.
Oh, maybe it wasn't such a bad article after all.
Well, Mr. Poe will take the publicity whenever he can get it. And, well, let's talk about other guests.
Yeah, we
Must we? Must we?
Are we finished? Are we finished with you, John? Do you have anything more?
Well, we had to talk to him first because we knew if we talked to Dave first and then went to John, everybody would just change to another channel.
Well, what story are you working on now, John? We're,
I'm working on a story on the nude beach up on Hullover.
Ooh. You need somebody to do research for you?
I was there Friday, and
A lot of people don't realize that Edgar Allan Poe was on that nude beach. Right.
I was there Friday with Alan.
We were playing volleyball.
We were doing an interview with a man who has been there, going there for something like 10 years, and the embarrassing thing I wasn't bringing up was the fact that he had a very small penis, almost not visible. We were in the middle of our interview when this character walks up, kind of shambling along the beach with Rastafarian dreadlocks, fully clothed. He walks up to me and he says, "Is this man going to the hospital?" And I said, "What?" And I just tried to ignore him. And he says to the man, "Are you all right?" And the guy says, "Sure, I'm all right." And he says, "Well, were you born that way?" And the guy says, "Weren't we all born this way?" And the Rastafarian says, "I've got mine." Kind of brought the interview to a mortifying end.
There's another eerie
no more
parallel with Edgar Allan Poe.
Was this your idea to do the story on the
They
nude
say
beach?
Poe is
This is the
asexual.
kind of
Maybe that's
ideas
why.
that I come up with. Yeah.
Did he have a broad forehead, this guy? Or you probably didn't notice that.
Do those two usually go together?
Oh, it's,
Well, there's hundreds of people who go to this beach on weekends. I didn't think anyone was really aware how big it was.
What was? Not this man you were talking to. I just want to know, in case people are wondering, was he interviewing me again? I do have a band, and Alpo and the Beef Chunks, they do refer to me as fairly big Alpo. So. And you like the band. That's another thing. Why
The
didn't
tape
you...
was terrific. I got a tape of his music, and I play it every day going to work.
Ah,
That is funny.
really serious, Mr. Stott. I'm going to write that down.
There's no need
When
to
I
kiss
put that
his
in my
butt
next
now,
press
John. The
release.
damage has
John
been
Barry
done.
of the Herald. Tape was terrific.
So, John, so you chose to do an article on this beach. What's the percentage? How many stories do you choose to do? How many stories are you told to do?
It's about half and half.
Mhm.
They give the great ones a lot of freedom.
The great one?
So you're about half
Oh,
grade
you're
then.
talking about
So you're
yourself
sort of
then.
half grade.
Okay, well that's an interesting question to start with. Dave Barry, the other Barry on our show. How many stories are you given the freedom to write about and told to write about?
No, all of them I'm told to do. I'm very strictly supervised.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who would be your immediate supervisor?
Well, it's a tremendously long chain of command. There's usually up to, what is it, like now it's about a dozen people involved in
Starts with
every
his wife.
column decision I make. Then you have the battery of fact checkers. It's really a complex operation now, humor. It's not like it used to be when I got into the business.
Well, that's interesting because when I read your columns, I always just think that you take full responsibility for them.
Yeah, well, that's because, like so many readers, you're an idiot, Michael. In fact, there's a tremendous, complex, military, almost Nazi-like organization involved in putting out my column.
Well,
I actually, on many days, have nothing to do with it at all. I pretty much go on, I do shows. I'm kind of like the Garfield the cat. I'm like an animated figure representing a vast industry that is my column. I really have nothing to do. I don't even know where they do it anymore. You know, it just shows up.
Well,
I didn't think you thought of that thing about the snails turning male in Canada.
You've got a real got on your mind, haven't you? It's,
I bet they're smaller than the guy on the beach.
snails developing.
Especially when they're just
penises.
starting to turn.
You know, you have to ask yourself. You talk about a story about these scientists, being busy beavers that they are, discovered that snails in British Columbia were turning from female to male. They were developing penises. Because they were, this is going to be a theme in this show, because they were drinking water with some kind of tin pollutants in it. But I want to know, how the hell did they find that out? You know, who's out there checking the snails? I've worked with snails all my life. And here in Florida, we've got snails all over the place. But it just never would have occurred to me to check, or to, that they even had them. I mean, it just. And there's some scientists out there doing it, and I just hope my tax dollars had something to do with it. That's all I can say.
No, it's Canadian tax dollars, we assume. This is in Canada.
Same thing.
Well,
same
not that I want to change the subject, but getting back to your column, Mr. Barry.
Yeah.
What are you working on
column?
now? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
John, famous Mr. Barry, or
Dave Barry, what are you?
John used to write the People column.
Yeah, I was going to bring
and
that
it was
up.
great.
Thank you for mentioning
I was
that.
a big fan of when John did the
That was
People
another one of my important assignments.
Well, why did you stop doing that, huh?
Wait, Dave.
Do you
Dave,
feel like
we're the
you've
host
come
of the
down?
show here.
No, it's okay.
Nah,
'cause I
just
want
for
to touch
now.
on this as
Yeah.
well. Do you feel like your career is sort of on the downslide now that you're no longer writing the People column? You're sort of
It went from the People column to a time to lunar tide tables.
You did some great lunar tide tables.
Which were very,
Seriously, didn't you think they had like a zip to them that wasn't there before?
They saved thousands of lives during Hurricane Andrew.
He's gone from the People column to lunar timetables to writing about me. I mean, this guy's career is going down the toilet.
Yeah.
Well, that's getting back to the people. Of course, the people, I'm sure everyone reads, the first thing they do on days that Dave Barry doesn't write columns for the Herald is
Which
turn
is
the
most days, let's
inside-
be honest.
Turns the inside of page 1 is the People column. Right now, I don't know who's compiling it, but that used to be your job. Was that an assignment as well?
That was sort of a side job while I was an editor reading copy on the National Desk.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something to do during downtime.
Oh, so okay, so that wasn't your only job at the Herald.
No, I hope not.
So I guess a lot of people called up and they asked for they asked for the Barry that writes for the Herald.
There were people who wanted to know why Dave Barry had been demoted.
Right, that column.
Carefully reading the byline. There was a woman who encountered a photographer at a Publix grocery store who said that she would like to pass a message on to the fabulous, famous Barry who worked at the Herald, and he said, "Oh, Dave? Yeah, I know Dave." And she says, "Oh, no, John Barry, the People column." And so the photographer was telling me this, and I said, was she really beautiful? Was she short, this young woman? He says, "No, she was kind of old and fairly heavy."
Nonetheless,
But,
now we know who the famous one is.
That's
the one
true.
that gets asked about in supermarkets.
And just very quick, I don't want to belabor this, but you compiled it from what sources? Is it whatever?
Oh, we make that stuff up. Boy, you really don't know much about the
It's like the
newspaper business at all.
It's all stolen.
Oh, it's stolen.
Well, there's like
Globe.
there's a rule. There's like a union rule about how Madonna is like Tuesday, right? Madonna. Princess Di Wednesday.
Yeah, we have quotas.
Okay, Dave Barry, did I ask you? Well, I think I did ask. Did you answer me what you're working on now? What?
Did you answer me?
Did you answer me? What
What kind of
stories?
syntax is that? We're
It's
talking to
always an
writers
embarrassing
here.
question for Dave.
Yeah. I mean, besides just writing my column, that's what I'm always working on, is writing my column. But you mean, I guess.
What kind of question?
No, well, I mean, your column, is that?
This is why I'm at the top of the sign now, because
And a good way to ask it, what lies ahead for Dave Barry? That's a good way to ask it. Have you really?
Okay,
try it.
What lies ahead for Dave Barry?
I look forward to continued immaturity followed by death.
What lies
Now,
ahead for John Barry?
No, I'm supposed to write a book, but I haven't started it, but I will.
You've written lots of books.
And John's
Poe,
work,
you've been talking too much, Mr. Poe. Why haven't you started this new book, Dave Barry?
because I was really busy promoting the last book, So you get out and you get so sick of the concept of any book for a while that even though the contract says you're supposed to start another one, in fact, give it to them. They want you to actually give them the book. That's the scary thing. It's like high school, but much worse.
And is this? You have a
So
contract
it's
to
not
write a
because
new
you're
book?
slack, then.
I am sort of slack,
Oh.
but I mean, everybody I know in the writing business is behind on a book. So I'm one of the. I used to not be, but now I'm one of those. But I am supposed to do another book. If that's what you meant by what
Oh yes, that's
Major
what I meant.
project.
Thank you for
that was it.
clearing that up.
That's
for
it.
us.
And John here. No, I guess we can't talk about that yet.
You're not writing it? You can't talk about your book?
It could be that you'll see a book with John's name on it.
But he's even more slack
Coming
than
down
you,
the
so
pipe.
probably never.
Well, you know, being that you both work in the same paper, trying to keep up with the standards that Dave Barry set for book writing,
It's not so easy, is it?
it's quite a challenge for you, John, to even attempt to write a book.
Well, we have a lot of people who write books. Carl Hyacin writes books. It's amazing that we get the newspaper out at all. What we do in many days is just use the same news we used the day before and the day before. We just run it over.
Thank God nobody reads
Nobody
it, right?
notices, no,
Phew.
no.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching public television. I mean, it's just,
Those nature shows, it's always about the elephants, I think. So Dave, before, we've always had you on the show by yourself in your past
well,
appearances.
you guys have been here too.
Yeah, what, do you resent the presence of someone sharing your spotlight?
He is a little peeved.
Yeah, you know, as soon as I got here, I saw John. I called my agent right away. Who booked this? You know what I mean? But then we worked out that John would sit in this chair, you know, so I'd be closer to the camera.
The lighting's better for
Yeah,
you, too.
thank you.
I
And,
really came to listen. I didn't want to say anything. I just want to hear.
Actually, at first when I invited John to be on the show, he goes, "Oh gosh, you know, I would freeze up. I wouldn't know."
and yet, within 30 seconds of your first question, he's talking about a guy with a really small penis. You know, like, does that sound like a guy who's afraid to talk on the...
Sounds like he wants to be
I
on
didn't
more talk
finish.
shows.
I didn't finish it. But after a little while, a little further in the phone conversation, he's worried about you taking up his time.
He said that Mr. Stack was such a good friend of Dave's.
I said he's a
says,
big
"Don't
fan.
worry."
I didn't say he's a friend.
He said, "Don't worry,
I
he'll
would
do
hardly
all-"
call them friends.
He said, "Don't worry, he'll ask Dave all the questions."
That's what we said. I said, "Don't worry, Mr. Stock is such a big fan of Dave's, and he won't ask you anything." And then you got all upset. Have we asked you enough now? Can we talk to the star now?
But okay, getting back to Dave Barry.
Could I retract that article I wrote about Mr. Poe?
So how did your last book? Is that the world tourist book? I'm sorry, I don't remember the name.
That's okay. It was about Japan.
Okay, Japan book. And how did that do? I mean, obviously, the standard, I guess, was set with your Dave Barry Turns 40. That was the...
Yeah, no, I may never have a book that does as well as that one, because...
Can't write that book again.
No, you can't, yeah. But that's like a book everybody gave everybody else on birthdays, you know. I don't know if anybody read it, but a lot of people gave it, and that was successful.
Well, is that because it happened to be everybody's birthday when the book came out, or was it just a good book?
No, it was not. It was a good book. I think that with books, so much about books is just sheer, like, marketing, sales, demographics, and it happened. That was a book about, especially humor book. That was a book about this giant thing that was happening to the most
People turning
self-absorbed
40, sure.
group of people ever to exist on the planet. So they all naturally wanted to.
Well,
Was that calculated on your part, Dave?
Actually, it was calculated on the part of a publisher who said, you know, this would probably do really well, and he was right.
Once again, they're telling you what
Oh,
to
I don't do anything on my
So
own.
whose brilliant idea was it to write about China?
Japan.
Oh, China. Japan.
That's okay. It was a solid minute ago that I answered the question, and I know you've got a lot on your mind. It was mine. Originally, I was going to write a book about Russia and Japan, and the idea that these are the two scariest countries in the world, one because it could blow us up and one because it was buying us. Then Russia stopped being scary, and I don't know that I ever really got full credit for that. And moments after I signed a contract to do a book about Russia, the 70-year-old communist regime dissolved. So I decided to do just Japan, which actually I was glad, because after I saw how hard it was to do that. I mean, you have to actually go to these places. You know, I'm not used to that. I'm like John, a real journalist who actually goes to nude beaches and things and does research at great personal distress and everything. I actually had to go to Japan, and it was very difficult because
Did you pay your own
it's a
way?
foreign country. Of course not.
Were you upset with Gorbachev for
Good
taking all?
God, John. You call yourself a journalist? Of course I didn't pay my own way.
Were you upset with Gorbachev for taking the credit for all of, or Bush?
I actually think Gorbachev was
I don't read the
not really in a position to take credit for the fall.
Gorbachev or Bush or Yeltsin? Who was it? I know Dave didn't get any
George
credit.
Bush did.
Bush. Oh.
George Bush did. And so you don't know what your next book is?
It's going to be about guys, a book about guys.
Oh, well, you certainly have enough experience.
I'm a guy, yeah.
And that's another broad topic.
Iron Dave kind of book?
Well, now he's like, it'll be so long past the iron phase that I guess by the time it actually comes out, I wasn't going to really try to tie it into any current trend. Just sort of a book on guys, because whenever I write a column on guys, I get this vast response, almost always from women, because all I ever say is, guys are jerks. You know, women like that. You know, it's a good way to pander.
Here, I thought you were writing about another large, self-absorbed group. I figured this was
Yeah,
another
I am.
calculated thing from your publisher.
There's no group more self-absorbed than guys that I can think of.
You know, his wife is one of the toughest editors at the Herald. Her name is Beth.
That's
She's,
right.
Really?
Beth is legendary.
Extremely.
So that's how
Here
you
I
got the
am.
job, huh?
Yeah.
Here I am thinking she only working there because you work there.
Oh no, that's a killer editor. I mean, she's much feared. People call it getting Beth.
She writes, if you misplace a comma, she'll write a long note right in the middle of the story about the 6 inches deep of a long lecture on grammar.
With
I guess
annotations.
So it kind of balances out your kind of easiness. And
Well, she edits all my columns
She
before
edits
anybody else does, so I can't mess around.
does she? I mean, that's surprising. Does she like your columns?
It's really hard to tell. You know, she's the top
No one
editor.
knows.
Sometimes I'll say later on, you know, I get this column back covered with notations and crossed out, and you know, and I'll say, well, was it okay? I mean, should I throw this column away and get another job? And she, no, I liked it. You know, that's all. Thank God.
You write a lot about your personal life. Has there been anything that crossed her desk that she refused to pass on to the Herald?
Beth never. Rob, my son, who's now 12, and you know, it was a big moment when he began able to read and suddenly discovered I'd write about, and his friends started being able to read, and you know, so we had to work out a deal where anything I write about him, he gets to read first, and if he's uncomfortable, then I won't print it or
Does
I'll
he get a
change it.
percentage?
No, of course not. He gets every toy known to the human race.
Oh, that's it. And you don't write about your wife much. It mostly is about your.
Yeah.
That's because she is the editor.
Because she's much
she
tougher.
He does write about his wife, and she...
It's all crossed out. Yes. Whole novels, you know, they're all gone now.
How much insight does your wife give you as far as, let's say, the next topic you're going to write about guys? How much insight does she give you to guys?
Well, in a case of a book, I probably won't even talk to Beth at all in the course of writing it. Because at some point it becomes too much of, you know, you never get away from your job if all day I'm writing a book and then whenever we sit and I talk about it. So I generally don't like to even talk about books when I'm writing them with anybody, including the editors, including the
How about
publishing editor.
television
Why is that?
co-host?
Because it's you just, you know, you're worried about finishing it. It's a giant burden. It's something you're thinking about and dealing with all day long. You just would like to think and talk about other things.
Well,
How many,
what would you like to talk about, Dave? I'm sorry.
You.
Let's
No,
do
let's
it,
do
Mr.
it.
Bob.
I have
It's hard to talk about myself.
One more question to ask Dave Barry. How many more books are you going to write?
How many more shows are you going to do?
As many as I can do.
There you go.
Okay, well, I guess that answers that question.
I-
Did you have something you
I
wanted?
did, I did. You know, Dave, in the past, when you've been on the show, you've been very critical of Mr. Stock as a co-host.
I
You
think he's
compared
really
him-
polished himself.
He's compared him unfavorably to Pat Sajak, of all things, right before he was canceled, I believe. Has he improved? Has he?
He's been really smooth and slick here. He's been working on those segues. He had a little problem before with his list of 19 questions written down, and we'd be in the
Which
middle
reminds me, I
and
have
we'd
a
be in the middle of a
question
pretty
to-
intricate discussion
Wait,
about
I
one
have to
thing,
write
and he'd
something
say, "Speaking of the economy," which
Yeah.
we hadn't been, you know, and then we'd shift gears. But you're really very good today,
Oh,
Michael.
well, thanks.
So here we
I like
have-
to think it's generally me maturing as a talk show host. And,
So-
and this is actually an audition for a national job. I
This
heard
is-
Dave Letterman was has a new job, so I figured.
This is great.
Anyway, I wanted
This
to
is
ask
great.
you.
We have,
Think
we have
shirts with
John,
collars,
We have
guy.
John Barry saying Al Poe and the Beef Chunks are terrific, and now we have Dave Barry saying you're much improved.
Dave,
Much
one of my favorite parts of the year. I'm certainly glad Tropic has reinstated the Tropic Hunt, and I know.
Oh, yeah. Watch how you pronounce that. But yes, we are. We're going to do it again this year in May.
And do we know where it's going to be yet?
We haven't revealed that yet, but it'll be a completely new location, and it'll be wilder than ever.
And do you have any hints for us? Any answers? Give us an answer, and then wait. You won't tell us
Oh,
the
okay.
question, and we have to figure out what the answer
this,
is
Jeopardy?
to.
Okay, the answer to the whole thing, and I can reveal this here because I know nobody's going to ever see this, okay, is... No, it's... I can't mess it up yet because we don't know the answer.
Oh, you don't know the answer yet. Do you have the clues? Do you have? I mean, how much is this planned already?
We have what we would call a good, solid outline of what we want to do, which is actually quite hard. That's the hard part of the conceiving of it is done. And now the next hard part is taking we have this idea, oh, let's get the Goodyear blimp. One year we said that, you know. And everybody says, yeah, we designed a whole clue around a Goodyear blimp. And then somebody actually has to go get the Goodyear blimp, which always turns out to be much more difficult than you might think. Or one year,
They get it for football games.
Gene Weingarten, my former editor, called me up. We had no clue at all in this case, no clue literally as to what our clue would be. And Gene called me up and said, I just bought 75,000 candy canes. Orange flavored. They were red and white, but they were flavored orange, you know, which was unusual. So Gene just knew we could figure out a clue to go with.
I have to interrupt you just for a moment, only because it's the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
So you're interrupting him for more than a
I'm
moment.
interrupting for more than
For
a
the
moment.
rest of the...
We could talk just after we say goodbye.
Did you
Okay.
ask these questions? I didn't see you. Do have something
No.
written down, but I can't
John, do you have anything more to add since you haven't gotten any airtime lately? John Barry?
Are we still on?
I just
What
want
lies
to say
ahead for
goodbye.
What does it say? President Pack? What is that?
Can I say goodbye, please? Hello. Thank you for tuning
No,
into the
you
Mr.
we never had to
Hello,
talk
Mr.
about
Puck
how
Show.
to
You want to say hello or goodbye?
Goodbye. We're here on Cable Tap, thanks to the Folk Club of South Florida. And I want to thank you for tuning in. And enough of this stuff. Let's talk more to our guests. So, John.
Well, you don't say goodbye and then go back to the guest. You say goodbye, that's it, Mr. Stock.
Okay.
It's
Well,
too
this
late.
is our
It's too
first
late to
show.
talk to the guests
We're still
Now
working
the
out
credits
the
roll.
kinks.
Here they are. The credits are rolling
Where are the
across.
credits?
Credits.
Do we have any
Mr.
credits?
Alligator did.
Well, Dave, if this was your
What's
show,
going on here?
if this was your show, Dave,
Oh, the
Barry,
credits are supposed to roll.
what would you
I'm
do for
sorry.
the last?
There they
minute?
go.
Yeah.
What
Well,
was that
there-
question, Mr.
What
Stock?
would Dave Barry do if this was his show and you had one more minute left to air?
You'd ask like one of those questions like that nobody ever has a quick, easy answer for. Like, you know,
After the show, in 2 minutes, you'll say,
In other
"Oh,
words,
I
the
got
same
it."
thing he would have done,
Yeah.
Mr. Stock. Way to go. Congratulations.
Well, those are the credits. I think it's.